If you have Roundup resistant weeds on your farm, yet you continue to plant Roundup Ready soybeans, then you're probably looking at, okay, what are my other options and what happens if I don't get my good pre-program on? We talked last week about how we really want you to use 3 pre's. That would include one of the yellows, metribuzin, and a PPO like Valor Authority. Okay, that's great. We hope that you do that. But unfortunately, we realize sometimes Mother Nature prevents you from getting all the herbicides applied when you want. Well, the problem with all those pre's in soybeans, they can't be used early post. You have to use something else early post. So we want to talk about what we would call option 2 today.
Well, in the Mid-South, the recommendation you'll hear from the universities is a good one. They'll say use your pre-emerge herbicides and get them on and get them activated before you seed the crop. In reality though, a lot of guys, wow, when the soil conditions are fit, they just want to seed and then put the herbicides on later. But if your beans pop right out of the ground, like happened this year, especially in many areas that were planting a little bit late, we had beans out of the ground, within just a few days of planting, you don't have much time to get those others on. That's why option 2 comes into play. We've got herbicides that give residual control, but yet they're safe to apply post-emerge in the crop.
All right, the products we're talking about here would include Warrant, Dual, Outlook, Zidua. Those products are group 15 herbicides. They do not have contact activity, but they do have good residual control. They actually all can be used on corn and soybeans, but the problem is in soybeans, we're going to want you to use a little bit lower rate. It's lower rates that are labeled. So don't expect the same performance you'd get in corn when you use them pre-emerge in your soybeans post-emerge. But what we do want to talk about today is, okay, Outlook, there isn't going to be a tremendous supply going into this next year. Zidua, not a tremendous supply. So what options do we even have left? Warrant is probably number 1. That's the least expensive option. It's 3 pints per acre, and after rebate, you're probably talking $6 is all. So that's not a bad way to go. Then you also have Anthem, which is a combination of Zidua and Cadet. Cadet does have contact activity. The Zidua, like I said earlier, does not. But that combination of Anthem for the low rate, the 4-ounce rate, you're going to be talking around $10 an acre.
So option 2 isn't like it's free, and some people will say, well, I don't like option 1 using your 3 soil residual herbicides.
$12 to $20 an acre.
Yeah, it's going to cost me some money. But I look at it again this way. Option 1 is option 1 for a reason. That's what you really want to do. And is it worth 2 to 2.5 bushels of soybeans? Absolutely, you're gonna get excellent weed control. But if your beans start popping up and you can't get those herbicides on before those beans come out of the ground, hey, that's what option 2 is for. So you don't say, well, man, I guess I just will disc the soybeans under. I really don't like that option. I'd much rather go with one of these option 2s. Now, the key is to get them out sooner rather than later. Yep. We get a lot of questions about, well, does this go on with my first shot of Roundup, with my second shot of Roundup? Definitely it goes on with your first shot of Roundup. And if you didn't get a pre-down, you're gonna need to make that first shot of Roundup a little earlier than you otherwise would. It may be just 2 or 3 weeks after planting and you're already back out there with Roundup and adding those residuals on. The other thing you may say is, you know what, I've got a heavy weed pressure issue out here. I'm gonna get those residuals on fast, even though my beans are really short. I just gotta get them on, and you may just have to pull the trigger and do that.
Now, the one thing we wanna caution you on, you are going to see a little bit of crop response, and I don't care which one of these option 2 herbicides you're using. For that matter, anything other than Roundup or Liberty on Roundup or Liberty soybeans, anything else is probably going to burn the beans at least a little bit. And obviously there are varying degrees here. So Warrant, Anthem, you're going to see a little bit of leaf cupping. It's really no big deal. The beans are going to come right out of it. And especially when you spray really early, you're usually in pretty good shape. No long-term damage or anything like that.
All right, here's the other thing, Brent. Option 2, guys will say, well, can I mix that with my fungicide application? Can I mix it with other herbicides?
Yes, you can, but here's the thing. Everything else you throw in that tank is going to probably add a little bit more leaf burn. And especially if you were to go with a foliar fertilizer, you're probably not going to use foliar fertilizer that early anyway. But we'd really caution you there. Hey, I'd maybe spray just a few acres, see how it looks before you spray everything. So be real careful with what your tank mix partners are. Talk to a good agronomist about whatever you want to do.
All right, let's talk about weed control then from those option 2 herbicides. What are we mainly looking at? Obviously, we're going to get some grass control out of the group 15s. That's a nice thing. But how about the tough ones like Roundup resistant Palmer pigweed and
pigweed, lamb's quarters? Those are the main things, pigweed and lamb's quarters. But in addition to that, yeah, you might have a little bit of suppression on ragweed and some of the other ones. The main thing is that we've got at least something else out there for the pigweed. Between the water hemp and Palmer pigweed, that's probably the #1 family that we have resistance issues with across the country.
Well, if you've got some that are up, you'll definitely get some activity out of the Cadet in the Anthem, so that might be the way you want to go.
And if you do that early, early, you still have other options you can come back with later. I guess we're just trying to say this is a good way to go to get some residual, do it real early in the season. You still have other choices to go ahead and spray later on when you have more weeds come back, but at least this gives you a pretty good start, especially if you didn't get the 3 pre on.
Well, it's good to have lots of options available to you in terms of weed control in soybeans, especially if you have our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?